So now and the whole debate about this was an absolutely colorblind debate, and
That's
you know,
just not true.
That-
That is just not true, that it was a colorblind debate. That, I mean, that's just not true. You haven't been involved in the debate, but there have been a lot of people debating with the city about those issues on the basis of race.
So
I
I have a
would
pretty
like-
good memory, and so I'm gonna just hand the microphone to folks as I have seen their hands go up, and this gentleman in the blue shirt was next.
Hi, yeah, my name's John Zimmerman. Well, just quick comment on the people that I know. I know a fair number of people who have been through the jail system here and who prefer to be not in the Johnson County Jail, prefer Muscatine and Washington. And the reason they give is they say that the jailers here are less humane to the inmates, not because of the jail conditions. So that's a word that I have from many people who have been in that jail. But my question is, what percentage do you have a sense of, what percentage of people who are in jail are basically because they're too poor to make bail? People who are, I mean, my sense is that there are a lot of folks who are local people who pre-trial have bail set and they don't have enough money to make bail, and so they sit in that jail without having been convicted to anything, and not because they're a risk to leave, but just because they're poor. Do you have a sense of what, how much of our jail population is because of that?
Well, I wish I could answer that. I'm not sure whether I could extract it from John Ness' stuff or not. I've looked at the jail roster periodically, and all I can say is a lot. I mean, there's people held in there for weeks and weeks, sometimes months, on $2,500 bail. Obviously, they don't have a dime. That is why we need more alternatives to cash-only bond. There's been a trend for a long time that higher and higher cash-only bonds. There's no 10% surety bonds, almost none, and that's why I see pretrial supervision and electronic monitoring as so darned important. And I also think that it would alleviate the racial disparity. In a nutshell, about 6% of the county is black. They comprise 23% of the jail bookings and 42% of the jail bed use. And that is largely because they're poor. They can't make that bail. If we had more alternatives to getting them out pre-trial, then that would be an immediate step to addressing that problem.
I'm going to try to ask my questions as being as succinct as I can. Number one, to what do the panel members attribute the surge in both incarceration rates and arrest rates over the last 20, 30 years? And to what extent, if any, can it be attributed to federal funding and grants, such as the Byrne grant that was mentioned by one of the panel members? Number two, on the brochure handed out, it quotes Iowa City Police Lieutenant Doug Hart as saying that one of the reasons that there's a surging arrest rates could be as simple as the fact that we have more officers working in the street. If that's the case, I guess my question is, why is money going towards hiring new officers and not towards social services, rehabilitation centers, or the judicial branch?
The Byrne grant is only for the police. It isn't going to fund the other alternatives that you're talking about.
Okay, one last question then is also maybe some of the issues that are being brought up here. If the May 7th referendum is passed, and if we believe that we don't agree with the discretion exercised by either the sheriff or the county attorney in deciding which cases to prosecute, perhaps this group or others that support its cause could sponsor some candidate and address the issue in deciding whether or not to re-elect our sheriff or our county attorney. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm particularly concerned about the racial disparity in the jail population, the economic standing of the people that have spent time in the jail or are spending time, and the arrest of students, primarily young people in the community, who get booked into the jail for perhaps not very long periods of times, but count as jail beds. So I am not a statistician, and I don't know exactly how to ask the question other than I hope what I'm going to ask makes some sense. And that is, can you say that for every, or tell me perhaps, for every perhaps 1,000 people that are booked into the jail, spend a night in jail, that are arrested on a drug charge, what percentage of those are accorded to the Iowa City Police Department, the Coralville Police Department, the Johnson County Sheriff's Department? Because I'd be very interested in knowing whether the Iowa City Police are disproportionately responsible for a number of the drug arrests going on in this town, and therefore contribute to the increase in the jail population.
I can answer that.
We'll
start with the panel.
I mean, do you have the answer?
Well, I was going to say that the figure that was discussed earlier, 323, in regard to the rise in drug arrests, 323 versus 626, that is directly from the Iowa City Police Department's annual report. They have a graph of crime in the last 5 years. You can extrapolate from that. Well, actually you can't, because you can't. The one problem with jail statistics is that you can't distinguish bookings for at arrest and bookings for a sentence very well. But actually, yes, Iowa City does contribute the majority of possession charges. Like, as you know, number 626 was from 2011, and I think the drug bookings are a little over 1,000. Some of those are for sentencing. That's for serious misdemeanors. You're going to have to assume that some of those are maybe for first offense for other drugs, because all first offenses for drug possession, simple possession of small amounts, are serious misdemeanor. This is unfortunately the kind of workaround you have to do to figure out what's going on with that. I hope that helps.
Second is University of Police.
That's one thing I want to address. I mean, you're both right. It's overwhelmingly the Iowa City Police Department that does this and responsible for this. Some people say, well, you know, different parts of the criminal justice system say, oh, this has nothing to do with me, point that way and point this way. You know, I mean, and yeah, that's right. It's a big puzzle here, and I wish Chief Hargadine would come out from under his desk and talk to us about this. I went down to the Iowa City Human Rights Commission, which is a city commission, and I said, well, I wish you would not endorse this jail until the Iowa City Police Department addresses this issue directly and puts a plan and either justifies the racial disparities or gets a plan in place to reduce them. But no, you know, we can't do that. But the other thing that's going on, not only is the war on drugs driving increases in arrest rate, that and the influx of black people into Johnson County, but the University of Iowa Department of Public Safety has completely revamped itself into a full-fledged police force. They're out on the interstate pulling over people. And they've taken over a lot of the responsibilities of trawling the bars downstairs. And their budget is doubled in 10 years. Somebody challenged this thing on the flyer saying, you know, the budget hasn't really doubled, and I called it Doug True today. He said, yeah, it's doubled at least. And you know, that's one good thing about Iowa City, by the way. You can always get information. I mean, and you know, Dave Wagner has always been very forthcoming, and Lonnie and university people. I mean, it's quite good. But the department, this budget of the university police has doubled, and the figure I saw, so I've been tracking, I didn't even bring this up, I've been tracking student arrest for 15 years. in 2012, 273 U of I students were arrested on drug offenses by the U of I Department of Public Safety, a 65% increase in only 2 years. And that's because more resources are being put into the University of Iowa Department of Public Safety. Now, the other thing, I'm drowning in statistics. The percentage of their total arrests for students is falling because they're becoming a community police force. So we're getting university money being used to get the U of I DPS out in the bars and out on the, I got pulled over just on the street the other day because one of my brake lights was out. And it was a U of I police officer. I said, what are we doing using? Do you need a card? Do I? Yeah, I do. So those are some of the answers to this. And I entirely accept the argument made by Mr. Farley that this is not an easy problem to solve, and it's not something we can turn around very quickly. I think we're going to have to educate people. I think we're going to have to hold people accountable. I think we're going to have to try to force the city council to pay attention to this. And I know that some people are already starting to do that. But we have to start somewhere.
I think that the situation will only get more tense. And it's curious that we have this discussion in here, in the Hotel Vetro, because it seems to me that in Iowa City you have a great conflict of interests. You have the central business district and an increase of upscale condominiums, an attempt to sanitize this area via police. But it's also the central drinking district. Had we all the bars south of Burlington, the situation would not be as tense. But I think it will only increase.
Just a quick answer to the gentleman over there. The Byrne grant essentially funds the personnel costs for the street crimes unit, which is 3 officers and a sergeant, and as I understand it, their whole task is to work on drugs.
Are there other grants that are received by?
I don't know.
So, one or two of the people who were sitting behind me were criticizing you because maybe you weren't on a task force or on a commission. And a task force and a commission, in my mind, is something that the government puts together to absolve themselves of responsibility. So what I know is that people are talking about racial disparity, and they're talking about students who are arrested and homeless who are arrested and this and that and the other. And I don't like to look at groups, I like to look at individuals. So what I know is that in the last 50 years, the Iowa Code has gone from 1 book to 6.5 books. And what we have is a society that's always in fear, always being driven by fear and by the boogeyman. And so what's the boogeyman? We have to have a war on poverty. So we have to build housing projects and have all the low-income people in one area, which can lead to problems. We have terrorism, so we have to have heavily militarized police in the street. We have drugs, so we have to have a war on drugs. And all these wars, these initiatives by the government, are nothing but a war on the people. And to make that point, there was a white woman who I spoke with who was arrested for contempt of court. In fact, she turned herself in because her public defender didn't notify her that she had a court date. And as I speak to people about this new jail, they're saying, oh, the public defenders, they never notify us when we have court dates. So this lady, she turned herself in, and on a contempt of court charge, she spent 19 days in the Johnson County Jail on a $3,600 cash-only bond. So for the people who want to say you're not on a task force, you're not on a commission, you're not on a panel, and that means you don't care, if you really care, you're going to vote against these jails. And we're going to put pressure on people, and I think we should be putting pressure on people, especially the judges, because they're writing very high bail and bonds. I think a lot of the problems come from them. But overall, we have to start checking the people who allegedly work for us and not allowing them to shove stuff down our throat 3 times in a row. It makes me mad.
You're here, what's your
did you have a question?
Yeah, my question is, should we put pressure, and you know, I noticed there were people here from the establishment who came and they wanted to make comments, but I suppose I'll frame this in a question. Do you think we should put pressure on the judges who are providing for some of the highest bail and bond in the whole state here in Johnson County? Should we put pressure on them? Would that help with overcrowding in our jail?
Well, I think that they're asking something from us. We have every right to ask something from them in return. That's, you know, and yeah, we can hold the Justice Center hostage. You might have guessed, we're not all exactly on the same page here. I actually am about this close to supporting it. What's stopping me is that they don't have a viable plan for controlling jail population growth. I went to the meetings where those were developed, and I came away frustrated because all the proposed programming is in jail. Nothing except on a list of things that have to be funded by the supervisors are even on the table at this point. And judging from their reluctance to fund some other perfectly viable alternatives, that yeah, I think we have every right to hold it over their heads, and that's kind of where I'm at.
I have an actual question, not comment, if that counts.
Jim was next, and then Aaron, and then I'll go to you, Jessica.
I would just like to say, first of all, I think it's inherently unfair that you guys get to make all the comments and get to have a full 5 minutes of commentary, and all we get to do is ask questions. Because I don't think that can fairly tell the other side. But I will stick to your format.
We're not arresting people for comments.
Did the League of Women Voters, were they asked that same question?
Yeah, how about that?
Let me ask the questions. Okay, number one, you talk about you don't believe that there have been any alternatives applied. Have any of you ever attended the alternative jail subcommittee meetings?
I went to all three of those meetings where those were developed. Yeah, I went to all of them.
How about over the last 13 years?
In the last 13 years. I was on that committee actually in about 2007. Lonnie asked me to be on it. I think I was on it for about a year and a half. I stopped going because it seemed kind of pointless for me to be there. The meetings were basically a recap of what everybody was doing in regard to that. It seemed like they had a pretty good handle on it, and it cost me a lot of money to attend meetings during business hours. I think I might have just been there because I had been part of the previous opposition in 2000, and I was a representative of the Jail Alternatives group on the jail task force. And I thought, well, maybe he's there because he wants to keep his enemies close. But actually, I was for a new facility at that time. In fact, I was helping them trying to figure out, well, how can you sell a new jail here?
Question I had.
Sorry, you asked about, I attended the Jail Alternatives proposal. And the one thing that I did look into, which I thought was very interesting, is the marijuana smoking school. County Attorney Linus set up a marijuana smoking school in the summer of 2010.
Well, you have to go to school?
Yeah, and a number of interesting things about that marijuana smoking school. 218 people. First, it only has to be an indictable marijuana possession offense, but you're not eligible for it if you also charged with drug paraphernalia or something like that.
That's false. That's false.
That's what we were told by Dave Wagner, who was there.
That's false.
Okay, but at any rate, 218 people have gone to this. It's not clear that this actually reduces.
Back off the mic a little.
it's not clear that this actually reduces the number of people in jail, because a lot of these people have already served one night, depending on how much money they have. And of course, it costs money. You have to pay to do it. But I've been trying to find out what the curriculum is in the school. Because, you know, I'm sure you know, for the last 75 years, the American people have been subjected to a campaign of misinformation and propaganda about marijuana, dating from Reefer Madness to the DARE program. And so, you know, the county staff person, Ms. Peckover, referred me to Janet, and Janet said, well, I don't know what it is. I've got a staff person, and I got in touch with her, and she said, well, we subcontracted to Mecca, and I've been trying to find out from Mecca what's in it. But of 218 people since summer of 2010, more than 50 have failed. And I said, well, how do you fail marijuana smoking school? And nobody seems to have an answer to that. I assume you fail a drug test. But
No, actually, there are 4 ways in which you can fail.
How can you fail?
You can fail by failing to complete the marijuana educational program school.
By not showing up.
Picking up another charge.
Oh, okay.
Failing to pay the court costs.
Okay.
And dropping a dirty.
Okay, so drug test, basically urine.
Yeah, and picking up another charge.
And, you know, I thought, well, you know, here we have, once again, 750,000 people in America every year are arrested on marijuana charges. It's partly because people simply don't believe what they're being taught and told about marijuana. And it may well be that marijuana smoking school is not only not helping in terms of reducing the number of people in jail, but it may just be a green light to the Iowa City Police Department to arrest even more people, to send us on down here, and we'll take care as many as you want. But I may be wrong about that, because I want to find out some more about it. It is not in the jail, and it's something that can go on whether we have a new jail or not. And it is clearly better for people, the 150 people who passed it, to not have a conviction as well as an arrest. It's clearly a better thing for them for that. But yes, I've looked into that.
Do you think it's fair to criticize a program calling it a marijuana smoking school when it's an education program, when you know nothing about it?
I know probably more about it than anybody else in this room. I mean,
If you complete the course, what happens?
Well,
If you
wait a second.
If you complete the course, what happens?
Could I reply to this?
There's no conviction.
Could I
There may be somebody here.
briefly reply to this? I have here a 2-page summary of the program. And it says here that clients go to court hearings once a week at a set time, and the drug treatment court program is based on 5 phases.
No, that's a completely different program. Completely different program.
That's different, huh?
Totally different program. Way different end of the spectrum. That's a prison diversion program.
Another question I have. The gentleman was saying that the United States has the highest population per 100,000 in jail. Do you know what that number is in the United States?
The U.S. has 5% of the world's population.
No, do you know what the number is per 100,000?
About 500.
About 520? And do you know what it is in Johnson County? Per 100,000?
Well, this is apples and
Are you talking about,
I'm just asking.
you're talking about the average jail population of the United States per capita as compared to Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, as luck would have it, I just looked at that. Kind of sparring with somebody on the line. So, yeah, and actually, he had it kind of wrong because he was comparing prison population to Johnson County jail population. So I actually did the math, and using 133 as county population, the average in United States jail population is, I think, about 330 per 133,000 population, and ours obviously is about 150. But we also have a correspondingly low crime rate, so you have to consider that too, for serious crime.
My next question is, when you say that there are 40% of the population in jail are black, do you know why they're in jail?
I actually brought this up in some of the alternatives and treatments subcommittee meetings, yeah, because, yeah, how can you really know? I tell you what I suspect is that they're disproportionately held pre-trial because they don't have any money. I mean, statistically, they're gonna have less money. There's also some question about why it seems to take longer for their cases to be processed. And I saw some meeting minutes where the county attorney said, what did she say? They had multiple continuances, for one thing, that were requested by the defendant. That was one factor. I forget the other one. Obviously, she had looked into this a little, and that's great. And multiple continuances, to me, suggests that maybe their public defender just couldn't make a trial date because they're so swamped.
Do you know the actual reason? I'm asking.
The
I have
actual-
one question a person.
Let me ask one other. Yeah, that's fair. Let me ask another question. Okay, I've spoken on 3 different occasions, and on 3 different occasions I've asked the jail to do a spot population check for me. On each of those occasions I spoke, I asked them to tell me how many people were in the Johnson County Jail for first offense marijuana cases. I'd like to see what each of your responses would be to that. On each of those occasions, how many people do you think were in the Johnson County Jail for first offense marijuana cases?
You mean as a percentage of the jail bed
No, how
use?
many people?
How many people in a given day?
Yeah, in a given day.
That depends on what time of day, because they're almost all released after their initial appearance. I would say, probably 3 held overnight, as a guess.
0. My question is, when you're.
That's a spot check, right?
That's not a spot check, it's just, I'm asking them, they don't know I'm asking for it, I asked for it. The question is this, with regard to marijuana cases, when you say people are in jail for marijuana, do you check whether or not they're also in jail with that charge combined with burglary, arson, assault, or other charges?
That's almost impossible to sort out. John Neff's figures are that people who are in jail any given night on drug charges alone, 20%. That's his figure.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Are you trying to imply that nobody is busted when they get caught with pot?
If they're busted, do they get off or are they convicted? Did they commit a crime?
Well, you're held overnight.
But did they end up being convicted? Were they justly charged?
Well, that's where it gets kind of fuzzy. A lot of them have probably have, they might serve as 2-day sentence, for example, I'm guessing, or they might get off on time served and a fine. They might want to get the charge deferred. There's all kinds of ways to resolve these things.
Those are
But
alternatives, aren't they?
huh?
And all of those are alternatives.
Yeah, but it'd be nice if there were a lot more. It'd be nice, actually, if they didn't enter the system in the first place. One of the points I was trying to make earlier is the likely impact that all these misdemeanor arrests have on the overall case processing load. Huh?
No.
I do not believe that.
What misdemeanor case are you talking about? Tell me the misdemeanor case you're talking about.
Well,
I practiced law for 41 years.
all that paperwork has
Before
to
our
be
next
processed.
question, I'd like to ask the panelists just back off the mic just a little bit, and then Erin has a question.
Hi, I actually came here tonight to learn more about this, not to quiz or have a who's got a better resume discussion. So anyway, so my question, I see on the Yes flyer that it's, that the quote, listening to the concerns of residents, the county revised the proposal accordingly. My question is, how has the proposal changed in the last 6 months? How has it taken into account any public input? What public input has been, what opportunities have there been to give public input, and how have our public officials responded to that or failed to respond to that? Thank you.
I actually have the revised proposal right here. Let's see. The jail beds were reduced from 243 to 195. They're shelling out a couple of jail pods to be finished later. There were 6 new courtrooms in the original proposal. Now there are 4 with, oh wait, okay, this is a typo. 6 courtrooms in the original proposal. They're gonna shell out 2 of them to be finished later as needed. About $3 million reduction in the cost. That part of that is due to in the cost of the ballot request, I should say. That the county is shelling out $1.4 million into the construction cost, so that reduces the ballot request. Actually, not finishing those jail pods and courtrooms is only saving, looks like a little less than $2 million. Now, what were your other questions? I'm sorry.
So what public opportunities have there been to offer comment, and how have our public officials actually responded? Because I see that there's a limitation maybe to save money, but I am assuming there's been a broad-based critique, and I don't see a broad-based response by our public officials to change the proposal to match those critiques. So I'm kind of asking you to give me a little bit of history about how the proposal's changed.
Yeah, well, another thing that changed was that they tasked they wanted to develop a long-term plan to develop more alternatives and treatments and diversions. I went to those meetings thinking that, well, if this sounds good to me, it might actually swing my vote, and I came away from it and no. And I got to participate probably at a level far exceeding anybody in the general public. We did ask questions. We were asked to submit questions in writing, and they distributed all of those questions to departments best able to answer them, and then they didn't answer them. So, but there have been, okay, there was a forum. They did hold a forum when the final report for that plan was released. I think that's the only one, isn't it?
There were 2. I mean, the jail committee had one, and the supervisors had one.
Yeah.
And Professor Künzli made his proposals to the supervisors. But
yeah, and of course, you're always welcome to go to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meetings and comment there, and for that matter, probably the Board of Supervisors.
Can Professor Künzli respond?
Yeah, I was a little bit perturbed by the response of the supervisors. I was also perturbed by working with the websites. You start with the websites, and then you kind of see the new proposal, and then you're told that you want to know more. So you hit, of course, yes. Then you are put back to a website that was from November, preparing that vote. And it really is confusing. You don't anymore know for what you vote. I mean, your question is absolutely correct. Now, some of the details were answered. One, I think the most obvious one, was people critiqued the aesthetics. Glass, and someone said, oh, we should have more stone. So that was done. I don't know how, but they just said we will use more stone. The size and the bed's number was finessed. And especially what I found most insidious, to tell you the truth, was the way they snipped away at the costs by getting it $3 million lower, but then saying, well, you know, immediately when we sell the current jail, we will immediately build it up. So I came away checking the websites. It was very difficult what they ultimately wanted to do. I mean, at one time it was 4 courtrooms, then 6, then 4 finished and then 4 shelled out. You don't know. But basically, I assumed that they wanted to have the same. Last time it got very close, 3-4%. If we get a little bit more support, we can do it. And a little bit finesse. I mean, I even found one passage in which someone said, I can't give you the name, or we have to address the blacks in prison because that makes us look good for the vote. And some of that has gone on.
I was also disappointed, I'll just say that. I write a blog and columns in the local paper. That's my way of trying to put ideas out there that I hope are constructive and civil. It's my intention. And I was trying to stimulate a discussion within the community about some of the alternatives we've discussed tonight, some that other people have addressed in the task forces and committees. And I'm just saying, personally, ask my opinion, which is all I know to tell you. I'm not collecting data on this, but my sense was that there was a desire on the part of the proponents to simply reissue the same old plan with enough modest tweaking that it could be characterized as a change, but without really digging into some of the potential alternatives that could have been pursued, including the one I mentioned this evening. But I raised that one and many more in an effort to, as I characterize it, getting the county to yes, that I didn't sense there was a lot of interest in talking about.
I'm not actually on the panel, but if it's okay with Jeff, who organized the evening, if I could respond to the question, if it's that allowed.
You've got the microphone.
Okay. Well, I've actually been to quite a few of the subcommittees. Following the November 6th election, we had gone to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meeting the following evening, and we made comments about there were questions about where was the opposition and how did this fail, and so we went to speak, and we were told if we put our name on a list, we would be contacted and invited to subcommittee meetings. And so Alexei and I went to most of those meetings. There was public outreach meetings, facility meetings, jail alternative meetings, and of course the regular Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meetings, which were open to the public, and if you knew where to look, would be able to find the dates and times, but they aren't really publicized. So at those meetings we kind of gave our ideas about what we thought would be good alternatives, and we found out quickly that there wasn't a lot of budging on the proposed Justice Center. We had ideas as far as, maybe it didn't have to be located, attached to the courthouse. Maybe there could be a different location, and that was shot down. And maybe we don't have to have a jail and courthouse in one, and that was immediately shot down, and that wasn't something that was up for discussion. What was up for discussion was the facade, the ugly glass facade, which has been changed, thank goodness. And the number of beds, which they literally reduced the number of beds, but the room for the beds is still there, so they can move those in sometime after building the building. So as far as, when there was opportunity for public input, it would have been at those meetings, at the subcommittee meetings, and there was a jail alternatives public input meeting that I had gone to at the courthouse within recent weeks. So there have been opportunities for public input, but I haven't found them to be very useful as far as having public input being heard. So anyway, that's my opinion or comments or answer to that question.
Somebody over here is raising his hand. 45 minutes.
I'll try and be quick. My name is Ron Berg, I'm the director of MECA. So I do know something about the marijuana diversion program that you were referring to earlier. And first of all, it's an optional program. I mean, nobody is forced to go through the marijuana diversion program. And it consists of an evaluation, a drug test, some education class, and we know that we can't go in, talk to anybody and try to convince them about what they ought to do. So the focus of the time with the folks in the class is to help them examine their choices and help them re-examine where their choices about marijuana use might be headed and see if that's something that they want to continue with. And then we follow that up with another UA to make sure that this is the first UA quite often can be positive because it takes longer to get that out of your system. So several weeks later, we should be down to a 0 on the UA. So that's, the intention of that is to re-examine. It's optional for people to participate in, there's no force. I don't know about the impact of what it has on jail population. We were excited to be involved with it because we don't think that incarcerating and charging people with legal offenses is necessarily helpful when you're looking at their drug use. We ought to be getting people into treatment. And in terms of being cutting edge, to my knowledge, Johnson County is the only county in the state that has any program similar to this that is trying to divert people away from the criminal justice system into treatment to get it off their record so it's not affecting them for long terms.
I just need to say, I find this so absolutely
Excuse me,
offensive.
I've been waiting
that
to
people
speak
get
here, ma'am.
treated as though there is something wrong with them because they smoke marijuana, so that they have to go through a marijuana diversion program that's costs all kinds of money for them to do that. What is the holy hell problem with smoking marijuana when you're 19 years old?
The other alternatives that are included through MECA services and with the funding of Johnson County includes a detox program. We have 6 detoxification beds that are quite often full. We also are at the jail every morning, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to do evaluations so that people can get released from jail and not spend there overnight. Jessica Peckover with the Jail Alternatives Program is very actively involved in identifying the treatment needs that people need so that they can get out of jail and involved in the treatment services. So my question is, if you go back and look at the report that was issued in April of 2003 that outlined 7 recommendations, number 1 recommendation was the alternatives. If you look at those recommendations, what is it you see that hasn't been done? A lot of the questions that are being raised about where should the jail be located? Should it be attached to the courthouse? Should it be separate? Should we sell this? Should we buy that? That has all been hashed out over 8 years, and my question is, what are we going to learn in the next 8 years that we haven't already hashed out and examined and come to some conclusions about? I don't have much faith that in another 8 years is going to get us to a different spot.
Your question was where in the task force report are things that haven't been done? Was that it?
Well, there were 7 recommendations, and it looks...
Actually, there were a lot. If you go to the appendix, there are about 77, I think. But the main ones, well, actually, the one I have been beating on now for 11, 12 years is intensive pretrial supervision. That was actually, I think, at the top of the list. Hasn't been done. And that is, now, I got a lot of flack because that is what the Department of Correctional Services does. But no, we're talking about a different program. We're talking about a county-funded program that takes it to another level. It's quite possible for the county to augment where the state left off in terms of funding and I think it's very important that they do that. And it seems to be really hard to get that through to people, even people who know what I'm talking about. You know, I mean, the lady from DCS said, well, there's 80 to 100 people on pretrial supervision. Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you could get more out if you didn't have such a huge shortage of staff. The county can fill that void. I'm not sure why that's so difficult to understand. And it is a large void. They are obviously stretched beyond their capacity to adequately supervise people pre-trial. They also have a lot of probationers to deal with and all that. I suppose you could use the argument, well, it's the state's job to fund them. Why should the county step in and fund them? I guess I could use the same logic if I go to somebody's house and look at something that needs to be repaired. Well, I'm sorry, I can't fix that because somebody else screwed it up. I'd lose more than half my business. That's what people do. They screw things up a lot, and you have to make up for that somehow. Somebody has to fix it. And if the state won't fix it, then we have to do it here.
Can I ask you a question about this program, since you clearly are the one who knows something, since you run it? Can I get a copy of the curriculum?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll give you my card.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding, and what I was told, this may be wrong, but it's what I was told at the meeting I went to, that if you successfully complete this, the charges drop, so you don't have a conviction.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, and you know that. But you still have an arrest record. You have a drug arrest record, and that's, I mean, it's not your fault that you can't get rid of the drug arrest record, but that's one of the most harmful things that's going on to our young people in this community with the increase in drug arrest, is that employers and fellowships. I was on the National Screening Committee for the Fulbright Fellowship. They ask if you've ever been arrested for a drug offense. The law school here even asks about juvenile arrest, which are supposed to be confidential. They even ask if you've been arrested, which is something they technically can't find out, but if they do, then you've lied on an official form, and that's one thing a lawyer can't do. So this is, I think it's a good thing to get a conviction off, but it doesn't erase the harm. This arrest record, which is public record, will last until you try to get into a nursing home. Some people probably have trouble getting into Oak Knoll because they've got a drug arrest in their record. So I mean, I'm not saying this to criticize what you're doing. I'm just saying that this is, this may not decrease jail overcrowding, and it doesn't it doesn't undo the harm that's done by the high level of drug arrest. That was just a point. But I'd be very interested in seeing exactly what kind of questions they're supposed to answer.
Well, I would like to say that as an ex-academic advisor for many years, I'm appalled that the University of Iowa police are arresting people for marijuana. It's just so counterproductive to everything that the university ought to be trying to do. The circumstances that Jeff has just alluded to are all too real to anybody who's an academic advisor. And that's a real shame, because these people are stigmatized by the charge. They've been charged with a drug offense. It has nothing to do with whether they're convicted or not. But it makes it hard, if not impossible, to get into medical school, all kinds of places. And the sin is not really that much of a sin. It's what I was getting to with the cruel and unusual punishment. Something that now across the country is becoming an accepted behavior, judging by the states that have put on legalization measures and medical marijuana measures. We're draconian by comparison, and the fact that the University of Iowa is contributing to this, to the extent that it is just nothing short but shameful. And if you want to put some pressure on anything, I would say pressure the university not to do that anymore.
I'd like to respond to another point you made. You talked about 8 years and so forth, and you were talking about the notion of a separate facility. A major part of that proposal was with regard to detaching the courthouse from the controversy that we hear again this evening. I have not heard this evening any controversy with regard to doing to the courthouse whatever the courthouse needs.